I'm Nagin Singh. This is One India. Today it's October 7, one of the historic days when Hamas attacked Israel and more than 1,200 people were killed. Now it is 1 year, and we have Mr. Jordan Cope. He's joining us from US, and he's counterterrorism expert. He's expert on Middle East, and we want to understand with him that where is this war heading, and will there be an end to this war or not? Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jordan. First question that I want to ask you that where is this war heading? With Biden asking for restraints, France asking for restraints, West is asking for restraints to Israel, but Israel, I think they don't want to stop right now.
So there always is an end to every war. The question is when that will commence. And Israel right now has existential threats that it must deal with coming from Iran, which has unleashed all of its proxies effectively from October 7th onwards. Israel currently is fighting a war of seven fronts, not just against Hamas and Hezbollah, but against the Houthis, against Iraqi militias and against other countries that have, other factions that have participated in this front. And so, what Israel must do is use the unfortunate momentum that was created from the October 7th attacks, seize it, and make sure to clear all of these fronts off of its borders. Israel is unlike any other country today in which there are existential threats literally on its border. Hezbollah with 150,000 rockets, Hamas, which unleashed one of the worst terrorist attacks in modern memory, not only killing 1,200 people, but resulting in the hostage taking of 250 others.
Right.
Um, it was an attack that was one of the worst in modern memory. And it should be noted, it was one of the worst attacks on humanity at large, with over 40 countries having had victims who were either killed or taken hostage. It's shameful that the West isn't supporting Israel more. It's shameful to hear that some Western countries are delaying arms shipments or
Mhm.
even withholding them. But this is a war that is necessary, not just for Israel, not just for Israel's security, but for the integrity of Western values.
But do you think it is a war between the religions? Of course, Saudis are not entering here, but do you think it is a war between the Jews and between Muslim nations, Muslim countries?
I absolutely don't think it's that because Israel, at the end of the day, 20% of its population is Arab, the vast majority of that Arab population being Muslim itself. There are certain action benefits for certain Muslim groups in Israel, such as Bedouins, to serve within the Israeli Defense Forces. It's very questionable what even constitutes Muslim identity, because throughout the Middle East and North Africa, many would not consider Iran's version of Islam, Shiite
Right.
Islam, to be a pure form of Islam. And it's similar in terms of how India's identity manifests. India itself has many Muslims within its population, even though it's predominantly a Hindu country. And so this certainly isn't a war between Judaism versus Islam. Israel itself has peace agreements with many Muslim countries before and after the Abraham Accords. So it's important to realize what this is. It's an onslaught by Islamist factions and state sponsors of terrorism who endorse Islamist ideologies, such as Iran. And even though Qatar isn't classified as a state sponsor of terrorism, it should be. And so Islamist factions and state sponsors of terrorism who endorse Islamist ideologies who seek to ultimately promote Israel's demise and destruction.
Right. How do you see the war, turning around? Because now we have multiple factions who are attached to it. Even Russian PM was in Iran just the day before the attack on Israel. And China has made statements that the war should be stopped immediately. But of course, there is no stopping from Israel, no stopping from the resistance forces, and of course, Iran. So, do you think there could be a world war if other countries like Russia get involved? And of course, US has sent their forces, some troops in Middle East. So, is there any chance that it can, trigger a World War III?
So, as I believe the Fox correspondent Trey Yinks noted, that wars never unfold as we expect them to. So, it's obviously very difficult to predict how it will. I think for now, the war is relatively contained between Gaza, Lebanon, and what could be Iran in the future. I don't think Russia and China want to get too involved. China definitely has a lot of prospects in terms of the region, which might counteract that prediction in terms of its One Belt, One Road and its maritime
Mhm.
Silk Road and whatnot. So what's important to consider, at least right now, is that Russia, at least in Ukraine, definitely has its hands tied. China might have some prospects to intervene, but I doubt that it would. And I doubt that this US administration, as we currently speak, especially before
Yeah.
elections, would want to war in the region with its troops on the ground. Unfortunately, Israel, for many decades now, has had to deal with all of these problems, these existential threats on its own. And the West needs to continue supplying Israel. They need to continue supporting Israel, not just because Israel is a bastion of hope as a democracy and the only democracy in the
Mhm.
region, but a bastion for human rights and values that the West can get behind. And India, of course, as well.
But the leaders like Kamala Harris, she said that what Netanyahu did is shameful, which is a very strong statement. There is other person, Trump, who is saying that you should hit the Iran nuclear sites as soon as possible. You should hit them first. So after November 5, uh, there could be Kamala Harris or there could be Trump. What can happen after November 5? If Trump wins, if Kamala Harris wins,
It's certainly a big question to be asked. The current administration, if that's any prediction for the future, has allegedly withheld or delayed arms shipments to Israel. So it's questionable how that will manifest in the future if the Harris administration is bears any semblance to the current Biden administration to which she is a part of. The Trump administration appears to have been a little more on the hawkish side. So I don't want to speak in advance and perhaps preempt or undermine any of their
but
future agenda, but we have to use, I guess, the statements that are currently at display for our prediction. And it seems that the Harris administration might be a little more dovish, might with even withhold or delay arms shipments. The Trump administration, on the other hand, might be more hawkish and supportive of war efforts. That being said, what his administration, not his administration, but what he has also said in the meantime, effectively, is that Israel needs to get this war over with sooner than later. And so, how to interpret that, especially before elections, is certainly a question to be had, but it definitely seems he's more
But
hawkish.
November 5 is going to be an important date for this war that is going on in Middle East.
Certainly. And I actually think that once November 5th passes, there is a possibility that these presidential candidates might actually be even more expressive for
Mhm.
Israel once the swing states are decided and they no longer have to, I guess, kowtow to potential voters in those states, and they could be more genuine about how they really feel.
Okay. My last question, Jordan. How do you see Netanyahu's role? Do you think he has succeeded in this war or it has been a failure for him? We have seen massive protest against him in Israel. And of course, the hostages, they're still there. 100 hostages at least. They're still under Hamas siege. So, how do you see his role?
How one defines victory in war is obviously a very challenging question. Initially, Israel's objectives were to free the hostages and to eliminate Hamas. Israel has since declared effectively that it has reduced Hamas from a military organization to a terrorist organization. It has effectively helped compel the rescue and or the liberation through through ceasefire. I need to rephrase that.
Right.
Israel has effectively reduced Hamas's capabilities from a military organization to a terrorist organization. By one means or another, it has effectively helped rescue 148 hostages. Unfortunately, 30 of them the bodies whom Israel has recovered are deceased. But that being said, it has significantly reduced and instilled fear within terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East and has reminded terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East that Israel is no longer going to be on the defensive, that at times Israel will have to be on the offensive in terms of its self-defense in order to protect its civilians. And it will catch terrorists off guard, as it did Hezbollah with the pager attacks,
Yeah.
one of the most precisely and well executed cyber attacks in modern day warfare. It's taken out significant Hamas leaders, undermining their morale, including Mohammed Deif,
Right.
including Ismail Haniya,
Yeah.
including Hezbollah's Hassan Nasrallah, and it looks like Hashem Safi ad-Din. These are significant losses to these terrorist organizations, once perceived as untouchables. And Israel has reminded these terrorists throughout the Middle East that there is unfortunately a new dawn that has arrived, and
Right.
that Israel will no longer be in the shadows when it comes to these existential threats that seek to destroy it. And that also comes to Iran, which has sent now hundreds of missiles directly into Israel,
Yeah.
completely transforming this proxy war into a direct confrontation. And as
Right.
Israel showed when it struck the aerial defense systems outside of its nuclear facilities in Iran, this is no longer this is a new precedent that has now arrived, and Israel will no longer wait for the threat to build up.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, Jordan.